It's 2 o'clock in the morning and the world is silent. You are exhausted. Your body is begging for sleep. But your brain? Your brain has other plans. Out of nowhere, it drags you back to a Tuesday afternoon 3 years ago. You're standing in a grocery store, or a boardroom, or a heated argument with your ex. You remember the exact look on their face when they said that one thing that made your blood boil. And then it happens, the perfect comeback. It is witty, it is devastating, and it would have ended the entire conflict right then and there. But you didn't say it then. You said nothing, or worse, you stuttered. Now you're wide awake, replaying the scene over and over, trapped in a loop of mental gymnastics. This isn't just a personality quirk, and you aren't crazy. This is a specific psychological phenomenon that reveals a massive glitch in how the human brain processes conflict and status. Today, we are going to deconstruct the anatomy of the 2 a.m. savage comeback. We're going to look at the biological reason why you turn into a genius only after the threat is gone, the evolutionary survival mechanism that turns these memories into mental parasites, and most importantly, the psychological trick to finally shut those open loops so you can actually get some sleep. If you've ever felt like your brain is working against you, stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll understand the glitch that is actually trying to save your life. To understand why we think of the perfect insult at 2 a.m., we first have to understand what happens to your brain during an actual confrontation. Think back to that moment when you were being insulted or challenged. In that second, your brain didn't see a social disagreement, it saw a predator. The amygdala, that tiny almond-shaped part of your brain responsible for the fight or flight response, takes the steering wheel. When the amygdala fires, it triggers a massive release of adrenaline and cortisol. This is great if you're being chased by a tiger because it shuts down everything non-essential to focus on survival. Unfortunately, one of the first things it shuts down is your prefrontal cortex. That's the part of your brain responsible for complex logic, creative language, and you guessed it, witty comebacks. You literally become cognitively impaired because your body thinks you need to use your muscles, not your metaphors. This is why you find yourself staring blankly or saying something stupid like, "Yeah, well, you too." Your brain locked the library of your vocabulary to save power for the exit door. But here is where it gets frustrating. The moment you are back in your bed or in the shower or driving alone, your body finally feels safe. The adrenaline fades, the cortisol drops. The amygdala hands the keys back to the prefrontal cortex. Suddenly, the library is open again. All those high-level cognitive functions come back online with a vengeance. Now that the pressure is off, your brain can finally process the information properly. This is known in psychology as l'esprit de l'escalier, or the wit of the staircase. It's the phenomenon of thinking of the perfect reply when you're already halfway down the stairs leaving the party. It's a cruel irony of biology. You are only smart enough to win the fight once the fight is impossible to win. But that doesn't explain why your brain won't let it go. Why does it keep playing the tape on a loop at 2 a.m.? This brings us to one of the most powerful forces in human psychology, the Zeigarnik Effect. Back in the 1920s, a psychologist named Zeigarnik noticed that waiters in a busy cafe could remember complex unpaid orders with perfect clarity. But the moment the bill was paid, the memory vanished. They couldn't remember a single thing the customer had ordered. She realized that the human brain is hardwired to remember uncompleted tasks much more vividly than completed ones. Your brain hates an open loop. It treats an unresolved argument exactly like an unpaid restaurant bill. Because you didn't win or find closure in that argument, your brain flags it as an uncompleted task. It stays in your active memory, circling like a plane that hasn't been cleared for landing. Every time you replay the argument in your head and imagine yourself saying that savage comeback, you are subconsciously trying to pay the bill and close the loop. But because you can't actually change the past, the loop stays open and the plane keeps circling, keeping you awake. Now you might be wondering, why would evolution do this to us? Why would nature design a brain that tortures itself over a conversation that already happened? To understand this, we have to look at our ancestors. For most of human history, your social standing was your survival. If you were humiliated in front of the tribe and didn't defend your status, you were pushed to the bottom of the hierarchy. At the bottom, you got less food, less protection, and fewer chances to pass on your genes. To your primitive brain, losing an argument isn't just embarrassing, it's a gut sentence. Your brain won't let you forget that argument because it's trying to train you. It's performing a post-game analysis. It's forcing you to simulate the scenario over and over so that next time you won't lose your status. Your insomnia isn't a bug, it's a high-stakes training simulation for a world that no longer exists. But here's the problem. In the modern world, being snubbed by a coworker or having a disagreement with a stranger on the internet has zero impact on your physical survival, yet your brain doesn't know the difference. It still uses the same high alert system for a snarky comment that it used for a tribal challenge. This leads to what psychologists call rumination. Rumination is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere. When you ruminate at 2 a.m., you're not actually solving the problem. You're just re-traumatizing yourself. You're spiking your own cortisol levels, which makes it even harder to fall asleep, creating a vicious cycle of stress and exhaustion. You've probably noticed that the more you think about that perfect comeback, the more wired you feel. You are literally triggering a mini fight or flight response while lying under a duvet. So how do we break the cycle? How do we tell the amygdala to stand down and convince the Zeigarnik Effect that the bill has been paid? The first step is to recognize the pattern interrupt. When you find yourself in that 2 a.m. loop, you have to consciously label what is happening. Don't just engage with the memory, name the process. Tell yourself, this is my Zeigarnik Effect trying to close an open loop. By labeling the emotion, you shift the activity from your emotional amygdala back to your logical prefrontal cortex. This is a technique called affect labeling, and studies show it can significantly reduce the intensity of emotional responses. You are essentially taking the steering wheel back from your primitive brain. Another powerful tool is the 10-10-10 rule. When you're obsessing over that savage comeback, ask yourself, will this argument matter in 10 minutes, 10 months, 10 years? Usually we're losing sleep over things that won't even matter in 10 days. By forcing your brain to look at the long-term timeline, you drain the survival significance out of the memory. You're teaching your brain that this isn't a threat to your tribal status. It's just a momentary blip in a long life. It's about shrinking the giant monster back down to its actual size. But sometimes the brain needs more than just logic, it needs action. Remember, the Zeigarnik Effect happens because the task is uncompleted. To fix this, you can use a technique called the brain dump. If you can't stop thinking of that perfect line, get out of bed, pick up a pen, and write it down. Write the whole argument out, write the savage comeback, write how it makes them look and how it makes you feel. By putting it on paper, you are signaling to your brain that the information is stored. You are externalizing the memory, which allows the brain to let go of the need to keep it in active RAM. It's the equivalent of the waiter finally writing the order down so they don't have to memorize it anymore. Many people find that once that perfect comeback is on a physical piece of paper, the mental loop finally snapshot. There is also a deeper, more radical approach called cognitive reappraisal. Instead of trying to win the argument in your head, try to change the goal of the memory. Most of us ruminate because we want to win. We want to prove we were right and they were wrong. But what if you change the goal to understanding? Ask yourself, what was that person actually afraid of? Or why did I feel so threatened by that specific comment? When you shift from a mindset of combat to a mindset of curiosity, the savage comeback loses its power. A savage comeback is a weapon, and you only need a weapon if you're still at war. Curiosity is a tool for peace. When you understand the mechanics of the conflict, the need for a comeback often evaporates. Now here's the secret that most people miss. The reason that comeback feels so savage and perfect at 2 a.m. isn't just because you're smarter than, it's because you're biased. When you're replaying the scene in your head, you are the director, the star, and the scriptwriter. You're imagining the other person's reaction as total defeat. In reality, even if you had said that line, they probably wouldn't have collapsed in shame. They would have probably just gotten more angry, and the argument would have escalated. Your brain is selling you a fantasy of a perfect resolution that rarely exists in real life. Real closure doesn't come from saying the right thing to someone else. It comes from saying the right thing to yourself. It comes from realizing that your value isn't tied to your ability to win every social exchange. Your brain is a magnificent, ancient piece of biological hardware that is doing its best to ask you in a modern world it wasn't built for. It keeps you awake because it wants you to be safe, it wants you to be respected, and it wants you to be prepared. But you have to be the one to tell it when the war is over. You have to be the one to say, thank you for the suggestion, but the bill is paid. The next time you find yourself crafting a devastating insult in the middle of the night, don't get frustrated. Smile at the irony of your own biology. Recognize the loop. Write it down if you have to. And then give yourself permission to be the idiot who lost the argument but won the night of sleep. Because in the end, the most savage thing you can do is not care about an argument that ended 3 years ago. If you found this breakdown of the 2 a.m. brain helpful, do me a favor and hit that like button. It helps the algorithm know that this kind of deep dive psychology content is worth sharing. And if you've ever had a specific comeback that you're still proud of years later, let me know in the comments. Sometimes just sharing it is enough to close the loop for good. Make sure to subscribe for more insights into the strange ways your mind works. And until next time, stop winning imaginary arguments and get some rest.